Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. One of the huge series I plan to read is Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts, with 11 big books. But before getting around to that, I wanted to start at her beginning. The development as a writer interests me. Therefore I started with her debut novel, Sorcerer's Legacy, which was published in 1982. I started reading it on March 18 and finished it on March 23. With 303 pages, it is not a big book. But the prose is condensed and requires the full concentration of the reader. In that respect, it is an absolutely impressive book. The story is about Lady Eliane, whose spouse, Sindel, has been killed in the recently lost war. She is imprisoned, awaiting a very unpleasant and no doubt very short future. In her cell, she is miraculously visited by Irland, a powerful sorcerer, who makes her a deal. If she agrees to become the bride of Darien, the Prince of Pendare, the master of this sorcerer, he will free her from her ordeal and grant her a safe transfer from her ruined duchy to another world. She also has to deliver him an heir, even though so far Darien has not been able to impregnate any of his previous ladies. It so happens that Eliane is with child from her late husband. While still mourning her husband, Eliane agrees and travels to this new world filled with political intrigue and vicious plotting in an attempt to overthrow Darien. The laws of his country stipulate that if he doesn't produce an heir within a certain period of time, his throne will be forfeit. The clock is ticking, and his enemies, with Physics in the lead, do all within their power to let Eliane fail in her mission. With bare wits as her main weapon, Eliane tries to untangle Physics' elaborate schemes supported by dark magic. Janny Wurts' mastery of the English language is unique. It inspired me to underline many sentences and scribble comments in the margin. There is way too much that is worth quoting, so I'll limit myself to a selection. Straight away on page 1, we get a glimpse into the feistiness of Eliane. Feeling insulted by someone, she replies, "May hell's own demons defecate on your tongue. It seems fit for little else." When at the beginning she is thrown into her cell, a thin slice of light fell through the barred slot in the door, while the soldiers wrestled slide bolts jammed with rust. This prose is so efficient, poetic, and visual. The thin slice of light emphasizing the sudden loneliness and desolation, and the sound of the rusted slide bolts jumps off the page. Minutes later she heard the moaning complaint of the upper door being drawn close. I love it when animation of dead objects is done right. Like here, where a door lets out a moaning complaint. It is spot on, like in the next sentence. The tears dried on her cheeks, and the water drops' monotonous song became predictable and familiar to her ears. Here, a water drop sings a monotonous song. Just beautiful. A few lines later, the darkness remained impenetrable as before, the water drop an erratic solo against stillness. Here I again applaud the writer's skill for staying within the previous musical metaphor. At this point, I'm only 4 pages into the book. One more animation later on. Her skin wept clammy sweat. When Irland abruptly tells Eliane that Aveline, Darien's sister, is dead, it says, his voice suddenly roughened with grief which has slipped restraint. This prose is so dense that some lines require to be read multiple times. Like this one. To her, dizzied by storm wind and darkness, it seemed as though Irland would bear her through the eye of eternity before the howling fury that buffeted her would abate. At times the density left me breathless. Reading this kind of prose leaves no room for repose or relaxation. This downside did get on my nerves at times. I almost longed for a few simple Sanderson-like pages. Still, even when I got a bit weary of this superb and intricate language juggling, many sentences kept standing out. For instance, when we meet Physix, who remains a somewhat flat character, we instantly know what kind of person he is. Physix's light, chill gaze broke through her thoughts, wrapped with the curiosity of a predator whose hunger is temporarily quiescent. Another minor critique I have is that the author goes through great effort to make the sequences within the story where magic is wielded understandable for the reader. In the end, this is only more confusing, at least it was to me, with lines such as the following. Eliane seized the distraction hypnotically, following the focus's progress as it shuttled to and fro, tracing out, curve and countercurve the path of Elon's artistry. This requires more than reading it a few times. In my opinion, Wurts tries too hard to turn something that can hardly be explained into science, like when Eliane uses the so-called mirror stone. Rage mounted, tangible as fire within her, and the polarity generated by her resistance widened. I love it, and it tires me at the same time. Also, much of the dialogue is very formal, even between people who are accustomed to one another, and humour is scarce, almost non-existent. The story is good and improves with each chapter. Still, it is pretty straightforward good versus evil. Nothing wrong with that, as long as the world building and character development make it an interesting reading experience. In that respect, Wurts comes up a bit short in my opinion. But this is her first publication, so it's appropriate to give her some credit. I'm very curious about my next Wurts experience. Sorcerer's Legacy, to me, is a book of a young, extremely gifted writer who overdoses the reader with ideas and her language skills. The story is told too fast, in particular the ending. It didn't grab me by the throat, and it also meanders a little bit. Characters remain flat. Darian is all good, in fact way too good to be true, while Physix is the exact opposite. But the beauty of her prose makes up for a lot of that. His hands locked across her back, an anchor against the currents of grief. All in all, a very impressive debut, which makes me very eager to discover more of her works. I gave Sorcerer's Legacy 75 points out of 100. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.